Hello everybody, welcome back to Reaper Minis TV. For this episode we're going to start off with a Okay, last time you saw the army, they were just inked and I hadn't really done anything else, and now you can see that we've got all of our base colors done on the miniatures. The bones are white, and for the most part the coats are red. Most have red hats or red do-rags on. I guess you'd call them do-rags for a pirate. A couple of them have green coats, but for the most part they're red. The tassels are yellow. Most of them are wearing brown pants for where they have their pants visible. A couple have green pants on, most notably the guys that are firing the cannon and the one that's coming out of the water who has the dagger in his mouth. Otherwise they have brown pants on. And I've got the metallic, I think it's a shining steel or an armor steel that I'm using for the guns, or at least the initial color of the guns. And I'm still trying to work out that aged patina on the cannon, so I've gone ahead and dry brushed over that initial ink wash with a little bit of armor steel also on there. So I'm probably going to end up washing that with brown and a green wash to try to really bring out a nice patina on that. So I've got, like I said, all the basic colors done here, and now what I need to do is do a shading over them, but I'm not going to dip them. If I dipped them, then I think the bones would turn out too dark and I'd have to go over them again, and I don't want to have to do that. I just want to get these guys done to a nice tabletop standard, so I'm going to use a medium flesh ink, a little bit lighter than what I initially used just on the figures as a whole. This will be a little bit lighter. It's going to go over everything that's not bone, just to try to give it a little bit of depth to the color. And here we are after that, washing with the medium kind of flesh wash, and you see all the colors have been darkened and maybe shaded a little bit. They're not washed out. You can still see the yellow in there, but it looks a little bit dirty, a little bit darker. The red is definitely darker and richer. The brown's the same thing. So overall, just a shading of everything. And I've gotten the patina the way I like it on the cannons, so those are ready to go. And now I'm going to hit them with a coat or a couple of coats of dull sealer, and they'll be ready for me to start working on the bases. And here they are after a couple coats of Krylon Crystal Clear Flat. That's what I use. Use whatever you like. I've used the Testors Flat before and it works fine. And they don't look a whole lot different from the inked version, except this just took a little bit of the shine off and also gives them a little bit of a sturdy outer coating, a hard candy shell sort of, to help them resist chipping through use. So now I need to start on the bases. That's going to take me a little bit of time because I'm going to have to really get the water effects down right for all the guys who are going to be in the water, which is most of them. We'll be getting into the water effects and the basing next time we look at the army. Okay, on to reviews, and starting off we have a Mi-Sher Dervish Warrior. It's a female fighter type that's carrying 2 long swords, and this is a reissue of a previous Warlord miniature by the same name, and the only difference that I've been able to see between the two is the Warlord one comes with a 25mm square base, slotted base, and a slotted tab instead of the integrated base that the current Dark Heaven Legends line one comes with. And I shouldn't even say current because they're both current models, but Warlord one came out first, and it is $1 more than this one. So if you're looking for a female player character model that's carrying 2 swords and is in minimal armor and is in a pretty decent combat kind of fighting dancing pose, either one is going to work well for you, but the current or the newest one is going to be $1 cheaper. So if that's a consideration for you, then obviously go in this direction. Next up is Tyree Spellsinger. This is a sorceress. By all accounts, I'd say she's a human, but you could use her as a half-elf or elf without a problem at all. She's carrying a large staff in her right hand, and it's topped with a little orb that's got a dragon sitting around it. Pretty cool little detail there. And in her left hand, she's carrying what looks like some kind of large potion or something like that, and I'm not really sure what it is or what it's supposed to be. It doesn't really look like a weapon, but it could be some kind of artifact. She's wearing very minimal clothing, A lot of skin being shown off, but nothing too skimpy. And I think the face is especially well done. It seems to be the focal point for me of the miniature anyway. Cleaning consisted of a couple mold lines that needed to be scraped off, and also a little bit of extra metal that's on her left elbow. You can see it coming off the end of her elbow there. So it took a couple of minutes of cleaning, but nothing that was too harsh or no defects or anything like that. And I'd say she fits the bill as a female sorceress without a problem at all. Jumping back into the Chronoscope line for a few minutes, we've got a couple of boy campers here, and they could obviously work as Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts, and I think the most obvious use for them would be as either normals in a game of Champions, maybe, something like that, or some kind of NPC that needs to be protected in, whether it's a Call of Cthulhu game, or, like I said, Champions or Mutants and Masterminds, or maybe even a game of all things zombie, where your goal or mission as the survivors might be to have to corral these kids in and protect them. So I think they have uses, even though they might be a little bit limited, but all three of them are really good, nicely detailed sculpts. Here we have Cleo Greene, and she is billed as a mod heroine. She definitely has a 1970s vibe to her. You can see that she's got a really massive afro and some short shorts on with some boots that come up above her knees, and her shirt is kind of tied together in sort of Daisy Duke style, if you remember Dukes of Hazzard from when you were a kid or when I was a kid. She's carrying a pistol in her left hand and a Thompson submachine gun in her right hand, and is in very much sort of a relaxed pose where she's just brandishing her weapons and just doesn't care what's about to happen because she's just that bad. Now, there was some cleaning necessary on the miniature. There were some visible mold lines that took a few minutes after I was done shooting the video to get cleaned up properly. One of the more problematic or troublesome ones was on her left arm, and it's just in a kind of a difficult spot to get cleaned off really well. There's also another one running up her left leg, so a little bit of cleaning needed on her, but I think it's a pretty cool and stylish miniature. If you're running a D20 modern game, she'd fit in there. Could fit in as some kind of agent maybe in a superhero game. Last of our Chronoscope miniatures for this episode is Dirk Goodspeed, and he is a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He's a Mountie. He is wearing the typical uniform of a Mountie, including the wide-rimmed hat. He's got a small pistol in his right hand, and I think you'd use him, or could use him, in pretty much the same way as with Cleo, or in similar games as the boy campers that we saw earlier, in just using him in a modern game, whether it's modern Call of Cthulhu or a modern espionage game. Maybe he could fit in there as a player character, or all things zombie, where you can just throw anybody into that game like that. But I just don't really see him in a superhero game or a sci-fi game or something like that. Alright, on to some Pathfinder releases, and first up, this is the Eagle Knight of Andoren, and it's a two-piece model where you have the sword that's cast on the tab along with the rest of the miniature, but you're going to have to clip it off, and just be careful when you're clipping it off, and then you put the sword into place where it has his two hands attached to the hilt of the sword, and that just fits in at the wrists of the figure where he's kind of resting on the sword itself. He's really not wearing much in the way of armor except for his leggings, but you can see there's a eagle or a feather motif that is repeated on his shoulders and on the sword itself. His hands are covering part of it a little bit, but you can still make it out. The details are all good on the model everywhere. It just seems a little bit plain to me, and I think that might be because of the pose. He might work well as an officer type or leader of a unit or something like that, but as a player character, it just seems or feels a little bit static to me. And this last model for us to look at this time around is a two-piece model. It's a Pactmaster of Katapesh. I think I'm saying that right. And the head is a separate piece that just glues right into place just in between the high rises of his collar. And this model, you might say, well, this is a fairly static model, so you're not going to like this one so much either, but the opposite is true. I can't really explain it, but this one just has a different sense of presence, maybe you could say, to where it doesn't feel as linear or static as the Eagle Knight did to me. This one just has a very commanding presence. Now, part of it is because of the height of the model. This is a very tall model. It's probably as tall as an ogre, so it's quite an impressive or imposing figure. And with all the details on his robe, you have the little bits of jewelry here and there, and the ornamentation on the robe, and you got the extra sash that's flowing over part of his robes along his arms. It just looks more impressive or menacing, or just has a, like I said earlier, a greater sense of presence to it. Now, obviously, as part of the Pathfinder line, this is a fantasy miniature, or based around the Pathfinder fantasy role-playing game, but to me, he is just begging to get dropped in to a sci-fi game, which means you could drop him into a superhero game as some kind of alien overlord very easily. So I think he'd work in almost any genre you wanted to drop him into, but for me, he's got to go into some kind of sci-fi game. Alright everybody, thanks for watching this episode of Reaper Minis TV. We'll see you next time.